I'm really excited to share with you a scientific breakthrough for managing cat allergens. My name is Dr. Ebenezer Satyaraj, and I'm Director of Molecular Nutrition at Nestle Purina Research. Cat allergies is a major problem affecting about 1 in 5 adults worldwide. It's the most common animal origin allergies in humans. Cat allergies have consequences both for humans and for cats. For cats, it significantly reduces the interaction between the allergic person and the cat. It's one of the most commonly provided reason for relinquishment of a cat, and it's a significant barrier to cat ownership and adoption. For the humans, it can cause fatigue, poor quality of sleep, reduced alertness, lower productivity and concentration. There are side effects of medication, and this emotional toll of not interacting and engaging with the cat whom you love, who's part of the family, can take an emotional toll on humans. Cats produce several allergens, but Feld1 is the major cat allergen. Up to 95% of people who are allergic to cats are sensitive to this particular protein. It's a protein that's primarily produced in the saliva and sebaceous glands. And importantly, all cats produce Feld1. There are no truly hypoallergenic cats. Another important point that I like to highlight is that the function of Feld1 for the cat is unknown. And because the biological function of Feld1 for the cat is unknown, the potential health and welfare effects of stopping its production are also unknown. And as you'll see as we go through this talk, this was the most important point that we kept in mind as we worked through the project to be able to ensure that the approach we took does not suppress, prevent, or destroy the production of Feld1 because its function is unknown for the cat. This slide gives an overview of the current management approaches that people take to manage cat allergies and allergens in their household. Falls into three categories: tools that they use around the cat, tools that they use around the environment, and of course, strategies that they use with the allergic individual. If you look at the approaches they take around the cat, the most common approach that is recommended by an allergist to somebody who's allergic to cat is to give away the cat, to relinquish the cat. And that, as we described earlier, is a gut-wrenching decision for a cat owner to make because they love their pet, and therefore giving away a member of the household can be extremely painful and difficult. The second approach they would recommend is to avoid interacting with the cat, which is also difficult because you want to keep the cat away from the places where you'd have commonly people going in. This can both limit interaction with the pet as well as limit the interaction that the pets like to have with their owners. The second approach is around the environment, where people try to clean and reduce the amount of allergen in the environment. This involves regular cleaning, use of several cleaning products, and other approaches like changing to hardwood floors, frequently changing upholstery. All of these involve significant effort by the pet owner to be able to manage the allergen in the environment. The third set of approaches involve and revolve around the allergic individual. They include immunotherapy, where you prevent symptoms in a person who's sensitive to cat when they're exposed to the cat. And then, of course, once the exposure happens and symptoms starts developing, you take medication to be able to manage the allergic symptoms. All these traditional approaches have some limitations. Immunotherapy, for example, can be costly, requires long treatment, sometimes years. And more recent studies suggest that the efficacy may be limited specifically for allergies to cat. Treating symptoms of allergic responses also involve potential side effects. If you look at the tools that people use to manage the environmental allergen loads, things like HEPA filters, excluding the cat from the bedroom or keeping the cat outdoors, removing carpet. Again, costly, difficult to sustain. Long-term compliance can be challenging because you have significant amount of effort that the pet owner and the homeowner need to put in to be able to get benefits. The other approaches that we described, removing the cat from the household, it can take months to sufficiently reduce the allergen load in the environment. And there is poor compliance because most people would not want to take this step. There are some reports about bathing cats, which have been shown to reduce the amount of allergen on their hair and therefore the allergen that gets into the environment. But this is not practical because most cats do not like to be bathed. Let me give you a quick overview of the novel approach that we are proposing before we go on to some specific studies. So let's begin by understanding the journey salivary Feld1 takes from the oral cavity onto the environment. Feld1 is secreted into the saliva, and from there it gets distributed throughout the hair during the grooming process, which all cats indulge in. As the saliva dries and forms dander, it then enters into the environment with shed dander and hair. When a person who's sensitized to cat encounters this allergen, the allergen goes and binds on to IgE molecules that's present on a mast cell, triggering a degranulation event that leads to the development of allergic symptoms. So the key event that triggers the development of allergic symptoms is the binding of Feld1 to IgE molecules that's present on mast cell. The approach we took with over a decade of research was to develop an approach that does not stop or alter cats' production of Feld1. And it leverages the use of IgY technology, which has been proven safe and effective. And I'll have a slide that describes a little bit of details around what IgY technology means. Here's a slide that depicts what happens when a Feld1 molecule that is neutralized by IgY interacts with the IgE molecules that's present on mast cell. What you're seeing here is the Feld1 molecule that is neutralized by binding of IgY molecules. In the second slide, what you're seeing are two IgE molecules that's present on mast cells. Under normal circumstances, Feld1 would come and bind to these epitopes that are present on these IgE molecules, leading to cross-linking and degranulation, triggering symptoms of allergy. Look at what happens when a neutralized Feld1 molecule tries to bind those epitopes. Clearly, it is unable to bind those epitopes and initiate the cross-linking and degranulation event, which is critical for developing symptoms. Let's put all that into a common path. The approach here is neutralizing Feld1 at its source. Cat diets are coated with the egg product ingredient containing anti-Feld1 IgY. IgY binds to salivary Feld1 in cat's mouth. During the grooming process, this neutralized Feld1 is distributed on the cat's hair and skin. Neutralized Feld1 is no longer recognizable as an allergen when released into the environment. Here's a quick slide that describes what IgY technology is. IgY is the avian equivalent of mammalian immunoglobulin, and IgY-based ingredients have been used for decades as ingredients in the livestock industry, as well as for human dietary supplements. So it has a very safe use for over decades. Let's now move on to the key studies that were conducted to be able to establish both the efficacy and the safety of the approach that we're talking about. The studies fall into two categories: in vitro and ex vivo laboratory studies, where we primarily wanted to show that we can indeed prevent Feld1 from binding human IgE. And if you're able to disrupt that interaction, it has biological consequences. And then in vivo studies with cats, where we first established the safety of the approach. And then we did two sets of studies to show that feeding a diet containing anti-Feld1 IgY can significantly reduce active Feld1 both in cat's saliva and in cat's hair and dander. The ability of anti-Feld1 IgY to disrupt the ability of Feld1 to bind human Ig was done through some ELISA assays, and I'm not going to cover the detail, but we were able to clearly establish that we can prevent neutralized Feld1 by binding to human Ig. What I'm showing here is that this does have biological consequences. What you're using here is a mast cell line that is kind of a stand-in for the human machinery that is involved in eliciting an immune response, allergic response. And what you see here is while Feld1 by itself is clearly able to bind and initiate a degranulation activity, when you neutralize this Feld1 with anti-Feld1 IgY, you're able to completely block the ability by about 60%. So you're significantly reduce the ability of anti-Feld1 of Feld1 from initiating a degranulation event. And these are controls where you use non-specific Feld1 IgY. You're not able to get the binding. So what you're seeing here is a specific response. So taking these together, we were clearly able to establish that anti-Feld1 IgY is able to disrupt the ability of Feld1 binding to human Ig. And that disruption has biological consequences in reducing the degranulation process that initiates and triggers symptoms of allergy. Having done that, we moved on to the in vivo studies, where the first study that we did was to be able to establish the safety of this approach for the cat. And as we described earlier, this is one of the hallmarks of this approach where we ensure that whatever we do does not disrupt, suppress, or destroy the Feld1 and impact the normal physiology of the cat. For this, we conducted a 6-month multi-level feeding study where levels that were many times higher than the levels used in the efficacy studies were used. It included 40 cats, and during the 6-month period, they were evaluated for clinical observations, body weight, food consumption, ophthalmic evaluation, CBC, blood chemistry, coagulation, and urine analysis. We also did some behavior monitoring of these cats to see if there's any changes in behavior of this cat. And when we looked at the data from the 6-month study, no clinical differences were noted between the control and any of the level tested, ensuring and proving that this approach is safe for cats. Having done that, we did our first study where we wanted to ask the question, does feeding anti-Feld1 IgY as part of an egg ingredient in the diet can significantly reduce the amount of active Feld1 in the saliva of these cats? For this, we enrolled cats that had moderate and high levels of Feld1 expression so that we can measure the levels in the ELISA. We excluded those cats that were below the detection limit of the ELISA because you cannot measure Feld1 in those cats. Saliva samples were obtained 5 hours after morning feeding when the diet containing the active ingredient was offered. And the active Feld1 in the saliva was measured using an ELISA kit and evaluated as weekly averages. This ELISA kit is only capable of measuring and detecting free Feld1. Neutralized Feld1 is not detected in this assay. Therefore, this is a perfect assay to measure the amount or the remaining amount of active Feld1 in the saliva of this cat. Each cat served as its own control. Here are the results of the study. What you're seeing on the y-axis is mean change from baseline, and on the x-axis are weeks. And you can clearly see that in the test group that was fed the test diet, we started seeing a statistically significant decline in the amount of active Feld1 in the saliva starting at week 3. In fact, we got a reduction of about 24% in the amount of active Feld1 in the saliva of these cats. So this study clearly showed that feeding a dry cat food coated with anti-Feld1 IgY significantly reduced active Feld1 in the saliva of the cat starting with the 3rd week of feeding. Having established that, we moved on to ask the question, what happens to the amount of active Feld1 in the hair when the cats are fed a diet that contained anti-Feld1 IgY. For this study, we enrolled a total of 105 cats, much larger study. They were fed a controlled diet for 2 weeks, following which they were all switched on to a test diet. Hair samples are collected by brushing the front, shoulder, and sides of the cat. Active Feld1 was measured using Feld1 specific ELISA, the same ELISA that we described in the earlier studies, and they were evaluated at weekly averages. Each cat served as its own control. And here are the results of the study. Again, on the y-axis, you're looking at absolute Feld1 levels, and on the x-axis, you're looking at weeks. And what you can clearly see is that starting in week 3 onwards, you were able to see a clear, statistically significant reduction in the amount of active Feld1 in the hair of these cats. If you take the data together, here are some key insights. 97% of the cats showed a reduction in active Feld1 levels compared to the baseline. 86% of the cats showed at least a 30% reduction in the active Feld1 level, and 50% of the cats showed a 50% or greater reduction in the amount of active Feld1 in the hair. On average, we saw a decline of 47% starting from week 3 of feeding the test diet, and it ranged from 33 to 71%. Clearly, significant reduction in the amount of active Feld1 in the hair of these cats. Let's go back to the slide that we started with. What we're proposing is that this is an additional tool that cat lovers, cat owners can use among other things that they use to be able to manage the allergen. What's unique about this approach is that it is safe, it is simple, and it is effective. Safe because we have established safety using the safety studies. Simple because you're going to be feeding your cat. Instead of feeding any other diet, you feed this diet, which apart from being a great nutritious diet, has this additional benefit. It doesn't involve any additional effort from you as a cat owner to be able to use this approach in managing cat allergens and cat allergies. This scientific breakthrough, therefore, is part of a comprehensive allergy management approach or plan that can help manage cat allergies while keeping the cat in its loving home. Here is a summary of the scientific breakthrough that I walked you through during my presentation. This is an innovation that delivers specific anti-Feld1 IgY in an egg product ingredient coated onto cat's kibble. The anti-Feld1 IgY safely and effectively neutralizes active Feld1 in the mouth as the cat eats. As the cat's groomed, the neutralized Feld1 is transferred to the cat's hair. Neutralized Feld1 is no longer recognizable as an allergen when released into the environment. Fundamental to this approach is that the normal Feld1 production is maintained and cat's overall physiology is not impacted. Thank you very much for your attention.